See, when you walk down Hollywood Boulevard or stroll through San Francisco's Fisherman's Wharf, you think you're spending money at local American attractions. You're wrong. The capital flows straight up the Pacific coast to a quiet office in Vancouver. This is the Pattison family, and they silently tax your vacation. But that's only number 8. From swallowing up Silicon Valley's foundational infrastructure to hoarding the most expensive dirt in Los Angeles County, these northern dynasties operate in the shadows. They export their billions south, dominating tech, media, and raw land, all while remaining invisible to the public. One family owns the data terminals every elite law firm in Silicon Valley is forced to pay for. Another shattered the record for the most expensive home ever sold in LA County history. And the man at number 1 wrote a single $100,000 check that turned into billions. These are the ruthless cross-border empires that own your attention and your city. Here is the countdown of the richest Canadian families secretly dominating California. Number 8. The Pattison family, the invisible entertainment monopoly. We begin with a dynasty that proves the most lucrative businesses are often hiding in plain sight, perfectly disguised as cheap tourist traps. Jim Pattison is routinely referred to as Canada's Warren Buffett, and for good reason. He built the Jim Pattison Group from a single, humble used car dealership in Vancouver into the second-largest privately held company in Canada. Today, it is an absolute behemoth spanning grocery chains, packaging, broadcasting, and agricultural equipment. Pattison did not inherit his wealth. He engineered it through decades of relentless, opportunistic acquisitions. His strategy was simple but devastatingly effective. He looked for highly fragmented, unglamorous industries like billboard advertising and magazine distribution, and systematically rolled them up. By operating with zero public shareholders, Pattison never had to answer to the frantic, short-term earnings demands of Wall Street. He could buy a struggling company, absorb its losses for years, and quietly restructure it into a cash printing machine. The Pattison family protects their multi-billion-dollar empire through absolute privatization. The Jim Pattison Group remains 100% privately owned. This creates a fortified wall of financial opacity. Competitors have absolutely no idea how much cash the family holds in reserve, making it impossible to anticipate their next acquisition. When the global economy crashes, highly leveraged public companies panic and sell off assets at steep discounts. The Pattison family, sitting on mountains of retained earnings, simply steps in and buys the pieces for pennies on the dollar. While Pattison is a Canadian icon, his family's grip on California is cultural and highly profitable. Through their entertainment division, the Pattison family owns Ripley Entertainment. This isn't just a quirky brand, it is a global licensing and real estate juggernaut. When you walk down Hollywood Boulevard or visit San Francisco's Fisherman's Wharf, you are walking through Pattison territory. They own the Ripley's Believe It or Not, attractions, the Guinness World Records brand, and massive aquariums. They do not just sell tickets, they capture the highly lucrative, recession-proof global tourist dollar. Millions of families travel to California every year, and the Pattison family silently taxes their vacations. The general public assumes that the owners of these flashy Hollywood tourist attractions are local American entertainment conglomerates. They are entirely wrong. The capital flows directly up the Pacific coast to a quiet corporate office in Vancouver. The Pattison family understands a fundamental rule of wealth. You do not need to invent the next iPhone if you can monopolize the physical locations where people spend their leisure time. They sell distraction, but their underlying business is the ruthless extraction of discretionary income. Speaking of who's quietly taking a cut of almost everything you spend, here's one thing that skips them entirely. Someone on our team has been wearing the Pulse R8 smart ring. It tracks your heart rate, your sleep, and your workouts straight from your finger. A week on a single charge, 100 days with the case, and it's fully waterproof. The part that got us was the price, under $40, a fraction of what the big-name rings cost because it comes direct instead of through the retailers that mark everything up. If you're watching on your TV, pause and scan the QR code on screen with your phone camera, or tap the first link in the description, because the next family turned a pharmacy empire into some of the most expensive estates in Los Angeles. Number 7. The Katz family, the Bel Air apex predators. When you think of the Canadian pharmacy industry, You do not immediately picture the sprawling, sun-drenched estates of Los Angeles. But Darrell Katz, the architect behind the Katz Group, successfully built the ultimate pipeline from prescription medication to Hollywood real estate. Darrell Katz built his initial fortune by executing one of the most aggressive corporate roll-ups in Canadian history. He took a small pharmacy operation and ruthlessly acquired competitors, eventually building the Rexall pharmacy empire. He understood that the aging North American population would require an endless, highly regulated supply of prescription drugs. Pharmacies are not just retail stores. They are heavily subsidized, government-backed healthcare distribution hubs. The cash flow was astronomical, predictable, and virtually immune to economic downturns. Katz protected his family's staggering wealth by executing a masterclass in exit timing. In 2016, he sold the Rexall pharmacy chain to the American healthcare giant McKesson for an estimated $3 billion. He took a massive, labor-intensive retail operation with thousands of employees and instantly converted it into an untouchable mountain of liquid cash. Once the capital was liquidated, he diversified heavily into sports, entertainment, and real estate, shielding his fortune from the specific regulatory risks of the pharmaceutical industry. While Katz is famously known as the owner of the NHL's Edmonton Oilers and the developer of the Ice District in Alberta, his true flex of dynastic wealth occurred in California. Katz took his Canadian pharmacy billions and became an apex predator in the Los Angeles real estate market. In 2018, he executed a staggering transaction, acquiring the sprawling Kurt Rappaport estate in Malibu for a reported $120 million. At the time, this shattered records, becoming the most expensive home ever sold in Los Angeles County history. He also heavily invested in the Bel Air enclave, purchasing the massive estate once owned by Art Linkletter for $85 million. When the public sees a billionaire buy a $120 million mansion on the Malibu coast, they assume it is a vanity purchase, a massive vacation home for hosting extravagant parties. This is a profound misunderstanding of ultra-high net worth capital allocation. These mega estates are not just houses. They are highly secure, USD-denominated safety deposit boxes. Real estate at this echelon functions as a distinct asset class, insulating wealth from inflation and currency fluctuations. The Katz family is not just buying a view of the Pacific Ocean. They are physically embedding their Canadian capital into the most exclusive, impenetrable dirt in the United States. Number 6. The Stronach family, the subterranean land barons. The Stronach family is synonymous with the global automotive industry. But beneath the grease and steel of their manufacturing empire lies a calculated multi-generational play for some of the most valuable undeveloped land in Southern California. Frank Stronach arrived in Canada from Austria with virtually nothing and built Magna International from a single tool and die shop in a Toronto garage. Magna grew into one of the absolute largest automotive parts suppliers on the planet. Stronach's genius was realizing that the major Detroit automakers, Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, wanted to outsource the complex, labor-intensive manufacturing of specialized parts. Magna stepped in, producing everything from seating systems to entire vehicle assemblies. The cash flow generated by this global industrial monopoly was truly staggering. For decades, Frank Stronach protected his absolute control over the multi-billion-dollar public company through a controversial dual-class share structure. Even though he owned a relatively small percentage of the total equity, his specialized voting shares granted him dictatorial control over the boardroom. Eventually, he agreed to collapse this structure in exchange for a massive, multi-million-dollar payout, taking his liquid capital and pivoting entirely into his true passion, thoroughbred horse racing. Through the family's private company, the Stronach Group, now rebranded as 1ST, they acquired Santa Anita Park. Located in Arcadia, California, just outside of Los Angeles, Santa Anita is one of the most famous horse racing tracks in the world. But the Stronach family's play was never just about the horses. Santa Anita Park sits on roughly 320 acres of prime, unbroken Los Angeles County real estate. In a region where developers fight to the death over half-acre lots, owning an uninterrupted 320-acre parcel in the heart of Southern California is a level of wealth that borders on sovereignty. The public views the Stronach family as sports and gambling magnates. They watch the races and look at the betting handles. They completely miss the underlying financial architecture. Operating a racetrack is simply a tax-advantaged, cash-flowing holding pattern for the physical dirt. The horses are essentially lawnmowers, keeping the grass short, while the family waits for the perfect macroeconomic moment. The Stronach family is sitting on a multi-billion-dollar real estate development opportunity, quietly disguised as a historic sporting venue. They are land barons hiding in plain sight. Number 5. The Skoll family, the Hollywood engineers. While most tech billionaires use their fortunes to launch rockets or buy social media platforms, Jeff Skoll took a radically different path. He took the foundational wealth of Silicon Valley and weaponized it to engineer American culture from the inside out. Jeff Skoll was the very first employee and the first president of eBay. He was the operational architect who wrote the original business plan that transformed Pierre Omidyar's visionary auction site into a globally scalable business. When eBay went public during the absolute peak of the dot-com bubble in the late 1990s, Skoll became a billionaire almost overnight. He captured the foundational, highly explosive wealth of the early internet. Unlike many tech founders who stay trapped in the Silicon Valley ecosystem, tying their entire net worth to a single, volatile technology stock, Skoll cashed out and diversified. He created the Capricorn Investment Group, a multi-billion-dollar family office that pioneered the concept of impact investing, deploying capital into sustainable energy, healthcare, and technology companies that promised massive returns while aligning with his worldview. By stepping away from the operational grind of tech, he insulated his wealth from the inevitable dot-com crash and subsequent market corrections. Skoll relocated his capital and his focus to Los Angeles, founding Participant Media in 2004. This was not a traditional Hollywood production company. Skoll recognized that if you want to change global policy, writing checks to politicians is inefficient. You have to change the culture, and culture is manufactured in California. Participant Media funded and produced highly influential films like Spotlight, Lincoln, and An Inconvenient Truth. They won dozens of Academy Awards, but more importantly, they launched massive, synchronized social action campaigns alongside the theatrical releases to drive legislative changes in Washington. People view Jeff Skoll as a generous philanthropist who happens to like movies. This is a naive assessment. Skoll operated Participant Media, which recently concluded its 2-decade run, as the ultimate culturally acceptable lobbying firm. He used Canadian tech wealth to bypass traditional political gridlock, injecting his specific policy goals directly into the American mainstream consciousness via the silver screen. He understood that whoever controls the narratives emanating from Los Angeles ultimately controls the future of the country. He wasn't just entertaining California, he was quietly programming it. Number 4. The Bronfman family, the architects of the soundtrack. The Bronfman family possesses one of the most legendary, turbulent, and deeply entrenched fortunes in North American history. They successfully transitioned from the gritty, physical logistics of alcohol distribution into the untouchable, infinitely scalable world of Los Angeles media rights. The dynasty was forged by Samuel Bronfman, who built the Seagram Company into the absolute largest distiller of alcoholic beverages in the world. Operating out of Montreal during the American Prohibition era, Bronfman capitalized on the massive, insatiable demand for alcohol south of the border. Following the repeal of Prohibition, Seagram legitimized and expanded, capturing a staggering monopoly on the global liquor trade. The cash flow from Seagram was the foundation of a multi-generational financial empire. By the late 20th century, the third generation of the family, led by Edgar Bronfman Jr., recognized a terrifying structural threat. The liquor business was slow-growing, heavily regulated, and highly capital-intensive. To protect the family's legacy, Edgar Jr. executed a massive, highly controversial pivot. He sold off the family's incredibly lucrative, rock-solid stake in the chemical giant DuPont to finance a hostile invasion of the American entertainment industry. He diversified out of physical liquids and into intellectual property. Edgar Bronfman Jr. moved the family's center of gravity directly to Los Angeles. He orchestrated the staggering acquisitions of Universal Studios and the Warner Music Group. While the corporate maneuvering was chaotic and resulted in the eventual sale of Seagram to Vivendi, the Bronfman family successfully embedded themselves into the absolute highest echelons of the California entertainment elite. They transitioned from selling physical bottles in retail stores to owning the literal copyright to the music and movies that define Western civilization. The public largely views the Bronfman story through the lens of old money liquor barons losing their original company. They fail to understand the sheer, asymmetric leverage of intellectual property. By injecting their capital into the Los Angeles music and film ecosystem, the Bronfman family shifted from a business constrained by physical logistics to one with zero marginal cost of reproduction. Every time a song is streamed, a movie is licensed, or a catalog is sold, the underlying IP generates cash. They traded the physical warehouses of Canada for the digital rent collection of Hollywood. Number 3. The Tsai family, the coastal e-commerce sovereigns. While the world watches the tech wars between the United States and China, one Canadian citizen quietly bridged the gap, extracting billions from Asian e-commerce and permanently anchoring it in the luxury coastlines of Southern California. Joseph Tsai, who holds a Canadian passport and was educated at Yale, is the co-founder and executive vice chairman of the Chinese tech Leviathan Alibaba. While Jack Ma was the charismatic public-facing visionary, Tsai was the silent financial architect. He was the executive who understood Western corporate law, venture capital structuring, and global finance. He orchestrated Alibaba's incredibly complex, record-shattering initial public offering on the New York Stock Exchange. He captured the explosive, unprecedented financial growth of the Chinese middle class and converted it into billions of dollars in personal equity. Tsai protects his immense multi-billion-dollar fortune through a highly sophisticated family office known as Blue Pool Capital. Recognizing the extreme political and regulatory volatility of holding assets entirely within the Chinese tech sector, Tsai aggressively diversified. He moved his liquid capital across the Pacific, purchasing massive stakes in alternative assets, Western real estate, and sports franchises. By heavily weighting his portfolio in US-denominated assets, he insulated his family from international trade wars and domestic crackdowns. While Tsai is globally recognized for purchasing the NBA's Brooklyn Nets and the Barclays Center for billions of dollars, his strategic, quiet deployment of capital into Southern California is a masterclass in coastal domination. He acquired the San Diego Seals, a professional lacrosse franchise, deeply embedding his family into the local civic infrastructure. More importantly, he has poured vast sums of money into the ultra-luxury real estate market of La Jolla, California. He operates a significant portion of his sports and investment empire from these coastal enclaves, establishing a fortified footprint in one of the most desirable, supply-constrained real estate markets on Earth. The public sees Joseph Tsai purely as a tech executive and a sports owner who likes basketball. They are missing the geopolitical capital rotation. Tsai is executing a textbook wealth preservation strategy. He is taking the massive, highly volatile e-commerce revenues generated in Asia and permanently cementing them into the hyper-secure, legally protected luxury real estate and entertainment assets of California. He is not just buying houses or sports teams. He is buying geographic and political stability for the next century of his dynasty. Number 2. The Thompson family, the invisible information monopoly. The Thompson family is the absolute richest family in Canada, commanding a staggering net worth that routinely exceeds $60 billion. They do not manufacture physical goods, they do not drill for oil, and they do not own flashy consumer apps. They operate entirely in the shadows of the professional class, quietly taxing the infrastructure of California's legal and financial sectors. The dynasty was founded by Roy Thomson, who began by purchasing a single, struggling radio station in Ontario and eventually rolled up hundreds of newspapers across North America and the United Kingdom. He famously equated owning a television station to having a license to print your own money. The family built a massive, traditional print media empire. But the true explosion of their wealth occurred when they recognized the internet would decimate print advertising. The family protects their $60 billion empire through Woodbridge, a private holding company that controls a massive, unbreakable 70% majority stake in Thomson Reuters. To insulate themselves from the death of the newspaper industry, they executed a brilliant, ruthless pivot. They sold off their traditional media assets and acquired massive data terminals and professional software companies. They abandoned the volatile, ad-supported consumer market and entirely captured the recurring, subscription-based business-to-business (B2B) market. How does a Canadian family extract billions from California? They own Westlaw and the Reuters data terminals. Every single elite corporate law firm in Silicon Valley, every major tech giant's legal department, and every massive hedge fund in San Francisco absolutely relies on Thomson Reuters software to function. They own the databases of legal precedent and real-time financial data. When a Silicon Valley tech company fights a massive patent lawsuit, the lawyers use Thomson software. When a California bank makes a billion-dollar trade, they use Thomson data. The family has established a mandatory, inescapable subscription tax on the entire professional class of the state. When people hear the name Reuters, they think of journalists taking photographs and writing news articles. That is merely the public relations arm of the empire. The Thomson family does not care about the news. They care about the operating system of the corporate world. They are a software and data monopoly. You literally cannot practice high-level corporate law or finance in the state of California without paying the Thomson family a massive annual fee. They do not own the buildings in Silicon Valley. They own the data flowing through the wires inside them. Number 1. The Cheriton family, the Silicon Valley godfathers. We finally arrive at the apex. The richest Canadian in California is not a flashy Hollywood producer or a ruthless real estate developer. He is a frugal, unassuming former Stanford professor who literally owns the physical hardware that makes the modern internet possible. With a net worth hovering around $13 billion, David Cheriton operates with a level of invisible power that most billionaires cannot even comprehend. David Cheriton's wealth began with what is widely considered the greatest angel investment in the history of human commerce. In 1998, two young Stanford PhD students approached him on his front porch. They had an idea for a search engine but were struggling to monetize it. Cheriton listened to their pitch, walked into his house, and wrote Larry Page and Sergey Brin a check for $100,000 to fund a company called Google. That single check translated into billions of dollars in equity. But Cheriton is not a one-hit wonder. He was already wealthy from selling his own tech startups to Cisco and Granite Systems. Cheriton protects his wealth through aggressive, militant frugality and extreme privacy. While other billionaires buy mega yachts and private islands, Cheriton is famous for driving a Volkswagen, living in the same modest Palo Alto home for decades, and cutting his own hair. By entirely rejecting the billionaire lifestyle, he makes himself invisible to the public and to the media. He does not waste capital on depreciating luxury assets. He funnels every single dollar back into hard, foundational technology infrastructure. Cheriton's true dynastic power is not his Google stock. It is Arista Networks, a company he co-founded in 2004. While the rest of Silicon Valley was obsessed with building silly social media apps and consumer software, Cheriton focused on the boring, highly complex physical hardware. Arista Networks builds the massive, hyper-fast network switches that route data. When you load a video on Facebook, run a query on Google, or buy a product on Amazon, that data is physically routed through Cheriton's hardware. He captured the absolute monopoly on the data center infrastructure of the West Coast. The public is obsessed with the software billionaires, the Mark Zuckerbergs, and the Elon Musks of the world. They fail to realize that software is completely useless without the physical plumbing to move the data. David Cheriton doesn't build the apps. He owns the pipes. He is the ultimate toll collector of the digital age. Every single time a tech company in California expands its cloud computing capabilities, they are forced to buy hardware from his company. He is the richest Canadian in California because he understood before anyone else that true, untouchable power belongs to the man who owns the infrastructure. From the silent data monopolies taxing our legal systems to the real estate predators hoarding the coastline, these Canadian dynasties prove that true power does not seek the spotlight. It operates across borders, capturing the foundational assets of the economy while the public is distracted by the noise. Which of these invisible empires holds the most control over your daily life? The data brokers or the land barons? Let us know in the comments below. If you want to understand who really runs the world, follow the money. Like and subscribe to Global Status. We will see you in the next one.